God, I hate, love, and hate Abattoir of Zir. But did you see how much time I had left? And also, only level 8 Tears of Blood. Hello, my fellow sorcerers, and welcome to this, my magnum opus, my supreme, min-max to perfection peak, Abattoir of Zir Ball Lightning masterpiece. This will be my final Season 2 Ball Lightning build because, I just couldn't leave it alone. I'm my own worst enemy. I had to know what I would do if I was genuinely going to try and push to tier 25 Abattoir of Zir. I'm not gonna grind the blood glyph. I just don't think it's worth it. It's not satisfying to me. But coming up with the build that I think would make it the easiest to beat Abattoir of Zir tier 25 with the lowest level blood glyph possible, that kinda gets me. And that is what this creation is. And you've already seen the proof of its power, and I really can't exaggerate enough how proud I am of it. We have lightning, shock, of course, the balls. We have fire too, and frost mixed in for a real tri-element spectacular that I think thematically, on top of just being bonkers, nuts, cuckoo, bananas, is really neat. So while the damage on this thing is, and I cannot stress it enough, astronomical, because we've essentially dropped nearly every bit of defensiveness that we can in favor of more offense. We don't even have disobedience anymore. We don't have any defensive glyphs on our Paragon board or nodes. This is full kill. Yet we remain immortal. Yes, immortal, even with the just bajillions coming out of every ball lightning. And that is achieved, of course, by doing a low life build. It's the only real way to push high on a sorcerer in any reasonable sense, so as much as I really hate playing like this, and I hope there is nothing in Season 3 and beyond that requires this style, because it's just not fun. Like, seriously, I cannot stress this enough, and I will say this right now: unbind your health potion if you are going to do this. I accidentally healed on the Bloodseekers of the T14, and it almost cost me the run. Thankfully, the conduit got rid of one of them in the 30 seconds it lasted. Bloody hell, they have so much health, so I could just about manage the last two, despite not having the low life DR, but my heart, ever since then, yeah, I took it off the default and moved it far away so I don't accidentally heal up and kill myself. Because let me put it to you like this: you need to be below 35% health. And you might think that that's extreme, but no. Let me take this moment then to explain exactly how never dying like this works, because I know for a fact there will be people who will come onto this video, a minority. The vast majority of you are wonderful. I love the discussions in the comments, the thoughts on the build. You guys seem to appreciate them. I love making them, and you taking the time to actually listen to me explain it is not just really, like, appreciated, but it does really help to understand and therefore pilot the build I'm presenting better. I don't just say all of this stuff for the fun of it. It does, I like to think, help, and I know that it at least does a little bit, because as I was about to say, you'll get people that'll come onto this, they will just look at the build, they will copy it point for point, aspect for aspect, without listening to any of the why or the how, and then they'll go into like a tier 8 and immediately die, and then come back and get really angry at me for apparently giving them a, air quotes, bad build, when the reality is, I mean, skill issue. So, you have to exist below 35% health, which is what I'm on right now, and you can see dealing with this constant heartbeat and the red effects around your screen is just one of the reasons it's so, like, playing like this. But, you know, I have to cover all Sorcerer. I love the class, and I owe it to you guys. So we, of course, are using mega damage reduction while injured. An easy example of it is the 43% on the boots. So this is active, and it means that while we are injured, we have all the damage reduction we ever need, as long as we have a barrier up. So of course all of our moves give us a barrier. While the barrier is up, we cannot die. And I mean that in the truest sense. You can stand in 50 elites exploding off no matter what, and you just won't die. You can camp the Bloodseekers and you just won't die, as long as you have a barrier while at low health. Though very specifically, it is not just any barrier. The barrier you get from teleporting, the barrier you get from ice blades, yeah, they help. But the two specific immortal aspects here are you cannot die with Flame Shield on, obviously, because you're immune. You press that, you get the 2.6 seconds in my case, great. But you also cannot die with Ice Armor on, because you do so much damage that the added barrier from your damage makes you, again, immortal, coupled with the damage reduction of being on low health. So when you press Ice Armor, of course it's on, and you see this little green bar that tells you how long of Ice Armor you have left. While that green bar is there, again, and I really do need to stress this, you cannot die. So your objective while playing this build, and it requires a little bit of management, a little bit of planning, it's not just roll your face through the abattoir, you at all times while fighting an enemy need to and want to have it so that there is a green bar above either Ice Armor or Flame Shield, and that you never have a moment where there isn't a green bar above one of these two that is implying that it is currently active. As long as you correctly manage the cooldowns of Flame Shield and Ice Armor, you cannot die. Now you'll notice in this instant example here, there is distinctly a period where I don't have both. There is this tiny overlap where we get our nice handful of seconds on Ice Armor, I wait for just the last moment to Flame Shield, and then now we have 2 seconds where we are killable and things are capable of one-shotting us. So we solve that with 2 main ways. A, enough cooldown reduction from various sources that overlap doesn't happen, both from resetting the cooldowns and just powering them down, like with Ice Blades applying its cooldown reduction to other skills, and then B, if you're ever going to be in a situation where there is no Ice Armor up and no Flame Shield up, and you don't have access to either, then you need to buy yourself time by either teleporting for the little barrier it gives you, by Ice Bladesing for the little barrier it gives you, which should buy you about the second you need to get to either Ice Armor or Flame Shield, or Unstable Currency too, as it also gives you a barrier. Then the other alternative is quite literally, okay, Flame Shield's going out and I don't have Ice Armor, I'm just going to leave. And Ice Armor's back, okay, there we go. You know, just step away from the enemies for a moment, give yourself that beat, and then go back in. So I realize that is a really long-winded way of essentially just saying, have 100% Flame Shield and Ice Armor uptime and you are immortal, and this build will give you a bajillion ways to have 100% uptime, but I really did want to get that across because I think it's something that goes a little bit missing in some cases, and it is the way that sorcerers are combating the higher tiers, because being alive like this is the only way to have enough damage to beat the higher tiers, because you can't sacrifice damage for damage reduction and hope to, do enough damage. You have to solve the damage reduction problem minimally, and that minimal solution is low health, damage reduction while on low health, and a Ice Armor, Flame Shield, cooldown reduction heavy rotation. And I think that I am currently at my limit with this. The fact that it has knocked on the door of tier 15 with such a low level 8 blood glyph is a real testament to just how powerful I have managed to get this and how far I've managed to push it. But as I said, I just don't care to farm the blood glyph. I am happy with what I've achieved, and making numbers go bigger so abattoir number can go bigger isn't really something that I think needs to happen. There is a lot of problems with the game mode, and without even sufficient rewards for doing so, it's sort of more an effort in frustration, RNG, and slideshow lagathons that get you killed, and for my sanity, you know? So I have reached this point that I am very happy with because I have reached it through the power of my build theory crafting, and I don't need to reach any further through the power of making Tears of Blood go burr. So, with that out the way and said then, let's actually go over the build and what's happening. For what might be the last time this season, it's the skill tree up first. 2 points in to your firebolt to both make it our first enchantment and to get to your core skills. Now, at this point, I do want to take a moment to say that one of the core offensive changes that we have done is work out a way to incorporate freezing enemies for the purpose of both doing more damage to them with Hoarfrost and, later on that we'll get to, a bit of Shatter infusion. So you could end up going with the Frostbolt enchantment and then using that as a slot, but then you have to drop the Firebolt enchantment because the other one needs to be what it is when we get to it, which means you lose a lot of extra damage as Burning Synergy is monstrously potent. So, I have come up with an entirely different solution that I am very proud of, and I will expand on that, but I just kind of wanted to touch on it here. Over to your core, simply just Devastation and 3 in Dominance for more damage and to get 2 defensives. You want to grab your Flame Shield, and you also want to put every spare point that you have left once you've done everything else into it. Every point increases its duration by 0.1 seconds, and as we stressed, we always want to have either Flame Shield or Ice Armor up, so this helps it and makes it a little bit less demanding. Get your teleport for all the good things teleport does, raiment, positioning, running away, grouping, and the DR. Then we want to get full glass cannon. We really are able to just ignore any penalties here because, again, we're immortal during Ice Armor and Flame Shield, and that's the goal, so let's get the free extra damage. 1 rank in here, so the defensives can reset, which is extra good with these two because it means it's a little bit less punishing. If we get a reset Ice Armor, we now know we have another one and can continue being immortal. Over to your Conjuration, where we get ourselves Align the Elements to get the usual double defensives of Protection, so everything gives us barriers, very important, and Mana Shield. We still need a little bit of damage reduction, but honestly, so much less. Technically, you could put these 3 points in Flame Shield, but I found them best placed here. Get yourself Ice Blades, and then take it to Summoned, and they will make up your next enchantment slot, so we have a swarm of Ice Blades, 6 of them constantly slashing, reducing the cooldown on everything, but most importantly, reducing the cooldown on Ice Armor and Flame Shield to keep us immortal. 3 out of 3 in Conjuration Mastery. This will stack up to huge amounts of multiplicative extra damage with how many Lightning Spears from Unstable Currents and how many Ice Blades from that and its enchantment. It really is one of the big sources of damage. One of the other big sources of damage is, of course, Devouring Blaze from our Firebolt Burning Synergy. Very nice to have. And then we also want to get Icy Veil, so our barriers have 15% longer, which basically translates to you have 15% longer Ice Armor, so you have 15% more time before you accidentally fuck up and die because you forgot to put Flame Shield on or you mismanaged your cooldowns. Basically, it just makes the build 15% easier to play. And I really do want to stress that this is kind of an awkward playstyle. It really is for pushing Abattoir of Zir, and it's not something I would recommend for just normal Diablo 4, but we'll expand on that in the How to Play It section. Get your Ball Lightning going, and then Enhanced and Wizards for the Crackling Energy Sea to give us infinite mana from Invigorating Conduit, which we of course also take. Over to Ultimates, where we grab Unstable Currents, as it is phenomenal, and then Prime for the attack speed. We no longer need Supreme because we won't be taking overflowing energy, and then we also don't get Electrocution anymore because we don't need the extra damage reduction. Then we have ourselves Permafrost to get 3 out of 3 Hoarfrost, so we get an extra 9% multiplicative or 8 multiplicative damage to our enemies, thanks to all the freezing we're now doing, which is just wonderful. And then past that, Frigid Breeze, so all of our ice blades constantly hitting give us mana. This is also bugged, and you get way more mana than you should from it, so hey, it's really nice to see, and helps a lot against the Bloodseekers, where you might be generating a little bit too little crackling essence to be comfortable. So yeah, this being able to get these two primarily is such a huge deal for Ball Lightning, but not as huge a deal as the key passive. Now, we start on Via's Mastery because we want the damage reduction, but we will be snapshotting it in order to keep it, and then we will actually be playing with Shatter for that pop of damage from the enemies that we are freezing, and this right here is everything. It is the secret sauce that makes this pop, that lets you reach tiers way higher than your blood glyph level should let you. So this is then our skill tree as it sits as standard. And let's actually talk about that Shatter then. So when you go in to the dungeon, and I will go over this whole setup properly, but we get ourselves this extra pop of AoE. We're going to talk gear first, so you understand exactly what's going on and what's powering it before we get into how to pilot it and how it works offensively, as the context will greatly help. Seeing just so little armor with no disobedience, it's so scary, but hey, it just works. Low health in these two, the proof is in the pudding. Offensively then, you want yourself a dagger, you want that damage to close enemies, and then conceited for the more multiplicative with a barrier. Then we want gravitational to make the whole thing work. On your amulet, you want to put Storm Swell for the 45% multiplicative vulnerable damage. We will always have a barrier, obviously, otherwise we just die. That's the whole point of this low health permanent barrier, so these two are just permanently on, and it is huge for us. Then on your boots, which are just normal boots now because they have to be to get the damage reduction while injured affix, but we'll go over affixes, you want exploiters. Eventually the enemies will become unstoppable from all your stuns and your freezes, so then we just get an up to free 40% multiplicative extra damage. I wish I had a better one than this, but it's what I'm working with. On your helmet, and I really can't overstate how pleased I am with just remembering this aspect even exists. It really is the ultra secret ingredient, unwavering. Taking damage has a % chance to reset the cooldown of one of your defensive skills. Huh? Yeah? If Ice Armor and Flame Shield keep getting reset, and they do constantly because loads of things are hitting you for a long time in Abattoir where enemies take a while to kill, you cannot die super extra, and you also don't run the risk of a mismanagement running out of both and then getting splatted. This makes everything so ultra comfortable, and it really is the juice. Just look at how many times Ice Armor came off cooldown here before I even needed it again. It really, really helps, and I'm so glad that I, well, again, remembered it even existed. If you do have Shaco and want to put Harlequin's Crest on, well, then you can equip it, and you're going to have to put Unwavering on your legs, but then you will be slightly more in danger, but not too bad. Basically, the Ever-Living lets you survive with your regular barriers, and in those seconds, if you do need to wait for one of these two, and that's not too bad. Uniques-wise then. Wait, not uniques-wise. I'm so used to having Tybalt's Will, I just didn't even not see it for a moment. Your legs. This is where you want your Ever-Living to also have a little bit of extra damage reduction. It might as well be there. The legs doesn't give us really anything else that we could want, and as I said, we still do need at least a little bit damage reduction to make the low health and barriers just push over the top. And also, the legs need to be not unique because they're also the damage reduction while injured. So, talking of unique then, we have ourselves Rashas. Of course, it's a huge damage increase, everything about it is wonderful, it has to be here, and it probably always will be for every sorcerer build going forward. Then we want Raiment of the Infinite. The grouping is wonderful, the extra damage is wonderful, it's essentially just needed to push the tiers. You have to be able to stack enemies efficiently, and Raiment lets you do that. Then we have X-Files. Now, listen here. I don't know why I said that like now, listen here, okay? We have this simply because of the cooldown reduction. And I'll get into more of why that is a thing when we get to affixes, but I will be providing an alternative if you have better gear than I do. But for now, the lucky hit is fine, the explosions of damage are fine, it is that fiery pop, but the cooldown reduction extra from a ring slot here is really, really good to have. So we also get Frostburn. This is the secret sauce. Because we want to be able to freeze enemies to power Hoarfrost and Shatter, we essentially have three ways to do that. The Frostball enchant, as I went over, Frost Nova, but where are we going to put Frost Nova on the bars? We need Ice Blades for the cooldown reduction, so we can't get rid of that, and everything else, obviously, we can't get rid of it for Frost Nova. I did experiment with it, but it just didn't quite pan out. And then I remembered Frostburn. All the affixes are great. The freeze duration is actually great, because so often all the enemies will be frozen, so even though you might accidentally mess up and have a second where you don't have either Flame Shield or Ice Armor, everyone is frozen, so they can't hit you anyway, and then you get it back up, and that is great. But also, the longer they're frozen for, the more damage you do to them while frozen, the bigger your Shatter explosions are, and those Shatter frozen explosions from your key passive is what absolutely destroys Abattoir and its high health enemies, because you do so much damage, and because they can take it. 25% of the damage you do to them while frozen is colossal. So you grab a pack of elites, grab loads of normal enemies with them, freeze them all, explode them all, and then it just chunks down the elites, and it's so effective. It was inspired by my recent Blizzard build, where Shatter was the key player in Abattoir there too, and I sort of sat there and went, can we actually incorporate that into Ball Lightning and have the best of both worlds? Yeah, you really, really can. Gems-wise, you want crit damage to vulnerable in your weapons, health in your armor, and armor in your jewelry, though you can also use your jewelry now to get resist to elements if you want, because we don't need the armor, but I still like to have it. It's largely irrelevant either way. So, affixes. This is very, very important. You are required to have at least 40% cooldown reduction for this to work. For these to have a low enough cooldown to constantly be up reliably with Ice Blade's cooldown reduction helping out. So that's why I am using X-Files, to get to 40% cooldown reduction. I've got the 20 from the focus, I have got 8, which should be 10 from my neck, and then I've got 7.4, which again should be 10 from my helmet. If this was 10, then I would have enough to get away with dropping X-Files, assuming that Rashas was also at 10. Basically, you need a perfect cooldown reduction roll on 1, 2, 3, 4 items, then you can drop X-Files for an extra aspect because you no longer need the extra cooldown reduction. I don't, so I do. If you do have more than I do, drop X-Files and then you want to snapshot the elements aspect, or just use an extra damaging one if you don't want to snapshot and you don't care for snapshotting offensive aspects. But that's sort of how that plays out. Or you can just still use X-Files anyway, even if you do have perfect cooldown reduction, because it just makes the build even easier to play, and you can still push incredibly high with it. So, general affixes. Past that, then, we want the following. Critical strike chance, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, attack speed, lucky hit chance, and then your general damages is to close, intelligence, to frozen, etc. Mana-wise, you want mana cost reduction and resource generation everywhere you can get them. Then defensively, well, we are just looking for, and again, very specifically, I cannot stress this enough, on your legs and your boots, you have to get damage reduction while injured as high as possible, or it won't work and you will die. The other affixes should be ranks of Ball Lightning, ranks of Devouring Blaze on your necklace, ranks of Conjuration Mastery, ranks of Hoarfrost. They're the big four that will give you more damage. But defensively, damage reduction while injured on your boots and your legs. On your boots as well, ranks of Flame Shield help. That's another 0.4 seconds of Flame Shield lasting, and then you are good. Notice we don't need damage reduction while injured on our necklace. We can get a more useful affix. We only need 2 lots of it to actually work, coming from the boots and the legs. So let's talk snapshotting then. What are we actually snapshotting with, and why in this build? Well, make sure that you walk in to the instance with Zir's Mastery on. You also need a second helmet with Mage Lord's Aspect as the aspect on it. You want to equip that when you go into a dungeon. So for now, let's do a quick example in real time with the training grounds as the dummy, which I guess thematically makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm not snapshotting any offensive aspects like elements, using a staff to double their power. Of course, I'm aware of it all, but I just think it sucks that there is content that's kind of tuned to require us to essentially exploit the game and equip a bajillion pieces of gear on and off as you go through the dungeon. It's just a little bit, you know, I like to see how far I can get without doing that stuff, but I'm not above a little bit of key passive juggling because it's quite easy to keep track of, and you just do it once at the start and then you just play normally. In any case, now that we are outside, you want to have Zir's Mastery on. You also want to have a helmet with Mage Lord's Aspect, and you want to equip it. Go into the dungeon, into Abattoir, with Mage Lords on, and with Zir's Mastery. Off we go. We will arrive and see that we have damage reduction from close, 34.5%. That's Zir's Mastery. If we then unequip it and put on Shatter, which is what you want to actually fight and play with, we still have 34.5%. Then you want to put your Unwavering back on, and lo and behold, we still have 34.5%. Yeah, it's quite nice, and it's just a cheeky way to keep that key passive going, while also actually working with Unwavering. If we didn't have Mage Lords, then it wouldn't work, or at least that's not how it worked for me in my testing. So, let's talk vampire powers. You want to have yourself resilience. We are going to be on low health deliberately, so this gives us a load of extra damage reduction, and is one of the reasons we don't need damage reduction while injured on our necklace. Now, technically, you can play without this, so you will still survive as long as the Holy 2 are up, and you can do domination, but I like the extra safety net that resilience does provide, and domination has its quirks, let's say. So, resilience back in. Then, Ravenous for the silly attack speed. We just need this, it's too much damage to pass up, as is making everything vulnerable all of the time. We have so much vulnerable damage, and it is needed. And then lastly, Feed the Coven, both for the mana coming in and the consistent 10% multiplicative increase. It just gets the job done, and is the best of the rest. How to play this then, pilot it to operate with it? Well, as I've gone over a lot now, the defensive juggling is your ice armor and your flame shield, making sure they're constantly up. Your teleport is to get out of danger, into groups of enemies, to Raymond them together. Use ice blades every time it's off cooldown, and unstable currents every time it's off cooldown, while spamming Ball Lightning. So obviously, we don't focus on lucky hit, but Ball Lightning hits so much that there we go, Frostburn has frozen the dummy, and then pop, there goes the Shatter. I've put my damage numbers back on so you can actually kind of see it work out. I will wait for him to freeze, and then he will pop. And that one was just a little quick cool million, and that was barely anything, right? That was so little. You gotta remember that when you've got so many enemies and they're frozen for so long and you're doing so much damage, the Shatter's going off staggered, which is what Frostburn achieves, because we're not freezing everything at the same time. The Shatter damage will feed into other Shatter damages because it will hit other frozen enemies. So you really do ramp up very, very quickly. And yes, the X-Files is going off too. So once you've got everything rolling, it sort of looks like this. Waiting, Flame Shield just before Ice Armor comes off, Ice Armor just before Flame Shield comes off, keep everything else going as well as it can. Oh no, I have a little bit of an overlap. Okay, I've got Flame Shield back, we're good, we can go back in, Ice Armor, there we are, and then everything's just exploding and dying and exploding and dying, and the freezes are going, and God, that was a nearly 2 million one, and you just see how it ends up being. It really is just perfect, in my opinion. It really is, and you just get to do the Bloodseekers exactly the same as you do the rest of the trash. They just take a bit longer because, hey, it's Bloodseekers. Finishing up with the Paragon board then, where we have 7 active glyphs, by the way, which, yeah, I'm also pretty damn chuffed with. Match me point for point, and I imagine you're pretty Paragon savvy by this stage, so I won't labor everything too much. Yet, what I have gotten, the Elementalist, of course, very nice extra damage, as is Elemental Balance, and your first glyph is the usual Elementalist for 15% multiplicative extra damage. Heading on up to our first board, which is your Enchantment Master, you want to get Elemental Balance like this, and then your second glyph is Tactician for the 10% multiplicative when you use a defensive skill. This is a nice permanent increase while still buffing these nodes for more non-physical damage. Go straight up to grab just Ruinous. Sadly, there's no spare points for Elementalist, but the damage to elites and the non-physical is worth grabbing. Then finish up with Erudite and head into Burning Instinct. This is the best board for Tears of Blood pre-level 50. After that, it's Static Surge, but for now, it is here, and, well, put it here, go straight to it, and fill in every single extra point to amp it up. Get yourself Cinders, and then Smoldering Embers too, and then we can move on. Sadly, nothing over here. Again, we don't have the spare points. We want maximum glyph activation. Go down now into Static Surge, arrange so that Paralyzing is top left like this. Go towards it, go through it, grab the extra mana, the damage to stunned, and then head straight down to the glyph, which is going to be Control. We're all about freezing and stunning and doing as much damage to enemies while they're frozen as possible, so this is huge, 20% multiplicative. Activate it up, and then just grab Incapacitate to its bottom right, as we don't need Electro, and the extra stun damage is nice. Then at this fork, we go straight down here into Ceaseless Conduit. We want it arranged so that Electro is at the top right, and then just take this very specific pattern and activate and socket Destruction. We've got a little bit of extra spare points in amping it with more dex here, so you can very much do the same, and then grab Galvanic, a little bit of extra lightning damage is fine, and then the dexterity behind it. Continue on diagonally to the last board from this path, which is Elemental Summoner. Go straight to the glyph, arranged it like this, and then this is Flame Feeder for that 10% more multiplicative, and activate it with the dex, and I've also amped this one extra time too with a final spare point, and then we can go grab Conjurer. It's fine, I guess, but mainly we just want to get to the dexterity that is behind it. Then on the other path to the right of this intelligence fork, we head straight to Overwhelming for even more damage to elites and stunned enemies, and then we head on up to the last board, which is the Frigid Fate board. Go straight right like this, and then crash into this magic node, go up through Weakness to get said Frigid Fate for 21% more multiplicative vulnerable damage, and then go down from here through the intelligence specifically to activate Adept as our final glyph for bigger ball lightning and more damaging ball lightning, and then take it to Chilling for the last 10 intelligence to activate this glyph. And there you have it. 7 glyphs, loads of boards, everything we could need, purely offensive, and it really does wonders and lets us go all out while being immortal with the low health damage reduction barrier setup. And that really, truly is that there has been a lot of tinkering, a lot of pain, a lot of I've lagged because the Abattoir of Zir is a slideshow for Ball Lightning, oh, and I guess I'm dead now. That has crafted this, and I am satisfied, I am done, I am happy. There might or might not be some quirkier builds, or another look at Fireball, or something along those lines going forward, but in terms of, you know, pushing the meta, I am content until Season 3, and I thank you all so much for coming along this journey with me. And also, a special shout out to Boo and PH33R for a big amount of material help along the way too. For now then, until next time, like if you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more, consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.